seat taken?
Nobody's in the seat, then I ain't taking, friend.
So this is, Sabacc?
Sabacc.
Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to Sabacc the Block, the official First Cut Star Wars show. We are down to break down the Acolyte, the season finale, the season as a whole, and joining us to do all of that, we have Maggie Lovitt in the house. What is up, Maggie?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait. This is great.
Yeah, we absolutely are so happy to have you on. So for anyone who doesn't know, Maggie has been the go-to source for all Acolyte news, all Acolyte interviews. So the first thing I have for you, Maggie, is how's this whole thing been for you?
It has been a little bit surreal. As somebody who grew up loving Star Wars so much, I never would have imagined that I would get to talk with a creator who has very similar experiences with a lifelong love for Star Wars and the same sort of passion. And it's really been kind of one of the highlights of my career to get to kind of unpack the episodes every week with Leslie. It's been a true gift.
Yeah, how many times have you gotten the chance to interview her?
Gosh, so we started with episode 6, so 3 times, but it feels like so much more because it's almost an hour every time of just going over every little detail, and it's been so good.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to actually reveal anything, but have you gotten any inside scoops as far as more details of what's to come or what could come?
I definitely knew everything that's happening this season far in advance, which has been obviously a really difficult secret to keep. I knew some of the stuff that was happening, and that's the beauty of off the record. But yeah, I think that everything that I have learned about insights about how the show's made and where things could go will be in tomorrow's episode of my postmortems that will be dropping hopefully tomorrow afternoon. So we talked a lot about this episode, kind of long-ranging stuff throughout the season, and then some teases of what could happen if we hopefully, fingers crossed, get a season 2.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure you guys check all that good stuff out at collider.com. All right, let's move on to our green Psylop for today.
Yes.
If you'd only had this little green Psylop.
Our green Psylop for today is all about the Acolyte season finale. So Maggie, what did you think of the finale?
Oh, I loved it. It was so good. I felt like it was the culmination of everything that I was hoping this series would be. It just hit every mark for me personally. The only thing that I think that it missed on is that I wanted it to be longer, and I wanted there to be more episodes because I wasn't ready to be done with it yet.
Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest consensus for the show in general, is just having more longer episodes.
Which is a great sign.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely something that they can deliver on. Just make sure to keep more in because we want to see more of these characters and more of these moments. Yeah, for myself personally, I was just kind of blown away by the boldness of the finale. I just didn't expect a lot of things that happened. I kind of expected, I kind of predicted a few things that did happen, but part of me expected a very down the middle kind of Star Warsy, Soul says sorry and we're going to move on and he's going to apologize to the council. And that's kind of the way it ends. And that's not what we got. And I think that's kind of bold. The boldness of having the dark side user almost kind of turn up, finish the right way. And then the light side user finish the wrong way. And I was like, that's actually really, really bold. And I don't know. I just find that fascinating.
I do too. I think that was something that I was really entertained by, seeing some of the reactions from people today, because I saw so many people being I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that season finale because all of the heroes lost. And I was like, no, the heroes won. This is a story about the Sith. You have to view it from their perspective. The villains are the good guys in this story because the villains don't see themselves as villains. Siths don't see themselves as the bad guys. They are the good guys. So we're seeing it from a different perspective. And I think that for me is what made the Acolyte so fun because I do love the villains. I have like every Sith character, like figure, like a whole shrine to Kylo Ren. I have like different like Marvel and DC villains. Like I love the villains. I love their stories. And I think that's why for like me, the Acolyte hit like a very specific, like untapped strain of storytelling that Star Wars hasn't necessarily like given the front seat to. So I love that. I love that the heroes were the villains.
Yeah, I mean, I have my notes right here talking about some other stuff, but I just got to get right to the characters, starting off with our boy Soul. Oh my God, Soul. What did you think of him? Just everything about him, his beginning and his end, as far as what this character is.
I think so. My first impression of Soul when we were first introduced to him was he was very Qui-Gon Jinn-ish. So like I instantly was like endeared to him because I love Qui-Gon Jinn. He was like the first like cinematic like great loss for me as a child. Like I sobbed myself silly as a kid when he was killed, and so I like immediately kind of glommed onto Soul. But I think what was like really smart with the Acolyte is that it doesn't try to trick anybody. It's very straightforward, and like the reveals, like it's all there. If you look back, if you rewatch it, it's like very easy to see where things are going. So I was kind of like initially curious about what happened with Osha and Soul, because it's very clear that there is like a fallout that led to her leaving the Jedi Order. And then with Brendock, it was so obvious who was in the wrong there, just because we know kind of the High Republic and the things that the Jedi are kind of helping the, you know, Republic do in terms of like colonization throughout the galaxy and to like some of the, you know, uncharted areas. And so my initial reaction was like, oh, the Jedi are up to something. But I don't think I knew just how bad it was until we fully got that episode that showed just how like intent Soul was on having Osha as his Padawan, which like walked like a really careful line of being like, oh, what's going on here? Why are you so obsessed with this girl? And also like recognizing that the Jedi do have this like innate desire to like teach and to be teachers and to like raise people up in the Force. And so like there's that aspect of like he's trying to do good. And I think that making a good character like the Jedi, this more like morally gray, questionable, threading this line of like, oh, this is not good, was really, really cool and really, really smart. And I love, as sad as I am that he's dead, I really love how Soul's story played out, because it's not really anything we've seen before in any of Star Wars. So that was a really long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, because I feel like that's even a better conversation. I obviously want to talk about Soul as much as everyone else, but how do you feel about the concept of, I mean, it's been on the Star Wars Twitter that's not on some other stuff, on the actual conversation as far as the concept of reversing what the Jedi are perceived as, right? We've always seen them in one way. We obviously see the flaws heavily in a lot of the prequels, but this is a much more detailed, much more thought out approach as far as, are the Jedi in the right? How did you feel the show handled that?
I think that it handled it in a way that was really accessible to general audiences who aren't sitting around on Twitter all day debating whether or not the Jedi are colonizers, which is like one of my favorite discourses to wade into it. It's something that the High Republic has played with that like really excited me as somebody with like a historical and anthropological background. Like that's the kind of stuff I love to see in my media. And I think it's very faithful to George Lucas as a creator, who was also like into anthropology and like pulled from real world like travesties as a basis to kind of shape these characters and these like organizations that are within Star Wars, which like the Jedi Order is one of those that like toe this weird line of like church and state, which I think gets them into a lot of hot water. And I think that's been done fairly well here, because I've seen like general audience people that I know like kind of wade into that discourse, but also not fully know how to, because it's not something they've had to be confronted with before. And I think that's to kind of echo what you were saying about how bold this season finale was, is that you have a character show up, Senator Raincourt, who like really nails home the point. The entire thesis of the series is that like the Jedi do have far too much reach. They have far too much unchecked power. They're acting like they're a religion. They're acting like the arbiter of the force. And now you have this whole like murder scheme that's going on under the radar, and it makes them look bad. And I think that this show does well with setting up where we get to in the Phantom Menace, which is the Senate has a lot of control over what the Jedi are doing, because there's obviously something that's happened in the past that's like led them to this point, and that's ultimately what leads to the Jedi's downfall. And then that ultimately gets us to like where the Jedi are when we were first introduced to them in the very first Star Wars movie. They're like scattered, far afield, and people are looking at them as like this ancient religion. So I think it really works with tying in these like little threads, to echo the idea of the thread in the Acolyte, pulling together all of these threads and creating something like accessible, because this is like introducing concepts to the general audience that maybe hasn't necessarily reached those points on their own yet.
Yeah, it's very complex, right? Because there is a something there for the Jedi to teach, to guide, to try to establish not rules, but try to establish an understanding of the Force, of what it is, right? And I feel like that's what they're really good at. The problem is the idea of flawlessness, the idea of perfection. I think the senator says it perfectly: control over your emotions, right? That's something that's not possible even for the Jedi. This is not some sort of superhuman being. This is still a human being, or an alien being, whatever you want to call them. I still feel like that's at the core of who the Jedi are. So this is this kind of push and pull and complexity. If you rewatch the Clone Wars, the prequels, it's tough because you see the Separatists and you're just like, yo, screw these guys. But at the same time, you still see flaws that the Jedi's overreach as far as the Jedi maybe placing too much authority. The Jedi being a military is another thing that's really controversial and really tough to swallow if you're a fan of what they represent, because they become much more militarized, institutionalized, systemically creating this military force that basically is dictating the way of the Senate. And it's like a super weapon, right? Because that's kind of what they are with the Force.
I mean, it's as corny as it is. It's very much like goes back to like the debates around the Avengers Civil War, like everything that was going on there with like the superheroes being like controlled by the military, but then also they have like way too much power when it's like unchecked, and they're out here doing things in like foreign lands. Like, aren't you American based like superheroes? Like, what's going on? And like it's the same concept. And I think that's why it's such an interesting concept to play with, is because we have seen it in different media where you have these super powered individuals that have control over some sort of like power, that then you have like a military complex or you have a governmental complex that want to control it. And it like does force you to like contemplate, is this a good thing? Is this sort of like oversight a good thing? Because ultimately, should we be trusting the government? Should we be trusting the military? But then at the same time, you see that they can cause horrible things to go horribly wrong. And then like, where are the checks and balances? And I think that's what's so fun about the Acolyte, is because it has been creating that discourse. It has been making people who worship the Jedi as fans kind of face the reality that like they aren't perfect. Very much like what Raincourt says about like when you're dealing with heroes, like you don't have to like face them when you put them on a pedestal. And I think that was such a great line.
Yeah, I think the concept is definitely very strong for sure. I want to jump back to Soul because.
So sorry.
No. This is perfect. I want to jump back to Soul because I'm just kind of losing my mind over what this character is. Because after last episode, I can't lie, I was expecting Soul to come in with like a heavy heart and be like, I am so sorry, I did the wrong thing. And he just like triples down. And the way he like starts off this episode basically blaming May and being like, you started the fire. And I was like, bro, she was 8. Like, I'm just blown away by this character because he really took a turn. And it's not a far reach. Like, it's something that you see coming, and you definitely see signs there, especially after last episode. But still, I was like, oh my God, this dude is like really kind of selfish, very selfish. I think that's the best word to describe who he is. And he almost kind of sees May and Osha as like a scientific discovery, not really as human beings or little girls or just people, but like a discovery that has to be presented to the council or has to be studied or guided some way.
And something that I was like thinking about before this episode, and it isn't something that I've actually talked about anywhere yet. I kind of had this realization that because of the way that he is so fascinated by the Virgins and the fact that they've discovered something that nobody has discovered, it's also so egotistical of him to want to make this girl his Padawan, because we have that scene between him and Indara where she's just kind of glib about the idea, like, that's why you don't have a Padawan. And then he's like, I'm going to get myself a special Padawan, like this one that's like super powerful. And I think it really speaks to like the hubris of the Jedi, that even though they say they're like putting everything but their self first, they are ultimately still like out for themselves in a lot of ways, because you can't really remove that. Nobody can be purely like altruistic in the way that's just not how we're made as humans. No matter how like good you are, at the end of the day, you're usually thinking for yourself because you have to take care of yourself. And I think that Soul is such a good example of how the Jedi teachings can fail a person, because this is not something that he just like came to the realization of when they landed on Bryndock and found Osha and May. This is something that was like instilled in him from the moment he was taken from whatever family he belonged to, and he was given this idea that they're like very special people with this very special power, and like they're the only ones that can really like control it and make sure that everybody who has this is also being controlled by this. And it's indoctrination essentially that led him to snapping. I mean, it's like what Raincourt says, like somebody's going to eventually snap because of all of this, and that's Soul. And so I think that as much as I like have been very hard on Soul, because there's a lot to his character that like makes me feel some sort of way, like he's also a victim in this to an extent, because he is the product of that teaching gone wrong, and not wrong and like, oh, he fell to the dark side, but like just fundamentally being instilled with this like sense of righteousness with the wrong outlet for it.
Yeah, it almost felt like, kind of going back to the colonization principle, it almost felt very like British like discovery, like where they're like, we're going to explore the world and discover different lands, and if we find something crazy, like we have the right to it because we have to study it. This kind of concept that also led to very dangerous stuff happening, and stuff that really disregarded natural, tribal, indigenous people and their lands. And I feel like that's kind of where Soul's coming from, where he feels like, I'm not being violent. I'm just looking to study. I'm just looking to get access to these two girls. Because he says, my biggest regret was not saving both of you. And then literally right after that, he says, because you guys are special and because you guys have this power. And it's almost like, again, he's not treating them like real.
And he didn't try to save them. Like, how can that be your regret when you like very actively were choosing Osha because she was the easy one? And I think that's like a layer to it that I haven't necessarily seen talked about. The reason why I think he gravitated towards Osha was because May was so convinced that she had this place in her home and her community as part of the coven, whereas Osha was kind of, I don't want to say she was an outcast, but she was, you know, he saw her first being far away from her sister. She had separated herself from the group. And so she was essentially like easy pickings because she's showing that she has an interest to be outside of it. So the fact that he watches that whole scene of like May coming to find Osha and kind of like chastising her for like leaving the coven to like wander off to follow butterflies, like he saw a target, a very easy target to pull away from the group. And I think that's very insidious and not necessarily like something he was maybe intending to do, but something that was like very clearly there.
Sorry, I froze there for a second.
Oh, no.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back for me.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally see that. I think the biggest thing for me that moment, I said it last week, was my frustration with Soul in that moment, as far as seeing May as like the bad kid and the kid who's like going to talk back to him and not really listen. And that was very frustrating for me because I feel like Soul saw that and he immediately said, I need to gravitate towards Osha because that's the one who's going to listen. She's going to obey. She's going to sit quietly. And it kind of goes into this trope as like rejecting the kid who is showing problems. And I don't know, it just really rubbed me the wrong way because it felt like it almost felt like a teacher kind of rejecting the kid who is giving him issues versus actually like trusting in the kid and really trying to work with him and not just pushing your values on them, which is what Soul wanted to do. Yeah, a very I'm just blown away by his character, because I do feel like him doubling down, tripling down, really led him down this path where it almost feels inevitable that he has to go.
Yeah. He wasn't coming back from that. He was never going to fully like take accountability for what he did in a satisfactory like fashion.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he kept saying like, I did the right thing. And I was like, did you, man? You keep saying that. Just an absolutely really fascinating character. And I really felt like that was a satisfying way to go. I can't lie. I've been predicting that since like episode 3. Yeah. I said Osha's going to kill Soul, and she's probably going to do it without a weapon. And then Chimera is going to take her on as his apprentice. I feel like it was there from the start.
It was. And again, that's like what I like about the show is like you can see what's coming. You're not necessarily taken by surprise, but you're still taken by surprise by the way in which it happens. Like, I think when I was thinking, oh, Soul's going to die, I was like, oh, it's going to be like May is going to kill him, or like something with a lightsaber. Like the way in which he died, I think was really interesting because she silences him. And he's been trying to use his words this entire time to like excuse his behavior. And so I think silencing him was like a very powerful move to make as well. And I have to say, like, I mentioned this in my review last night, like there's something very like unsettling with the fact that like, even as she is taking like she has like the agency to kill him. She's making this active choice to kill him. And even while she's like trying to make this decision for herself, he's telling her it's okay. Like he's taking away a part of like her power in that moment still. Like he still can't seem to like reckon with the idea that like Osha has kind of like outgrown him as a person. And there's just like something about that like settled weirdly with me that I love. Like it's not weird in a bad way. It's just like the kind of thing I'm like, oh, this is such like a complex character. Even in his dying breath, he's still trying to be like, I'm doing the right thing by you, which is just so.
It's very yikes.
It's very yikes. And it's not like a true yikes. It's just like the kind of thing where like we haven't seen a character like this. And it makes you think about, are there other weird dynamics like this between masters and their Padawan, like where like the master feels like kind of ownership of the Padawan, and like it creates a lot of opportunities for like Star Wars either on screen or in books and comics to play with that style of dynamic and see where that can lead, because I think it's something we haven't really seen the good guys. Like we know there's been toxic dynamics within like the Sith, but we've never really seen it within the Jedi. Even when like Obi-Wan and Anakin were like having their issues, because Anakin was way too old to have been in the Jedi Order, much like Osha. Like they were brothers. There was never anything like weird. There was never really any weird imbalance there. And I think this is just like, it's new, it's fresh, it's exciting. It's not like retreading the same like paths we've already gone down before, which I think has been one of the reasons the show has been so exciting to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see Soul painted in this light, and you see his arc, his journey as far as where he comes from and where he goes. But then on top of that, almost kind of like to add salt to the wound, we see Venestra, and I'm just like, she's a whole villain. and I'm just blown away by that.
Trying to make things work.
and I'm not a High Republic reader, but if I was, I'd be mad, because like they did your girl dirty, or whoever reads those books, because I feel like the fact that she covers up what happens, and it almost feels like she has a dark energy to her, a very kind of like a very corporate dark energy, if that makes sense, where she's very much like Yoda. Yeah, it's almost like
because they're so CEO. Old. Yeah, like they're both so old, they've seen so much, and their first instinct is always to just like cover it up, which I think is fascinatingly bad for them.
Yeah, it felt very like CEO corporate software. Yeah, where she literally like her secretary comes in and she's like, "What is it now?" And it's like that's kind of the vibe she gave off. And it's like someone has a complaint, and she's like, "Cover it up. We're gonna do this. I'll go." I just felt like she was terrible, like an awful person.
I know. I brought this up in my interview that drops tomorrow, but like it's so funny, like as somebody who is a High Republic fan that has been like invested in those books and comics and audiobooks since they first dropped, like I feel like I've watched Vern grow up over the last, I guess, 4 years at this point, and I'm so disappointed in who she became as like a grown up. But I think I also like I try to see it from her perspective. Like she is trying to uphold like what's left of the Jedi Order, and she's seen so much tragedy throughout the entire time that I mean, you have the hyperspeed, like everything that goes wrong. There's just like so much that goes wrong in the High Republic and with like her master and just everything. And you have things very clearly starting to erode. You can sense the like fractures and where the Jedi Order is. And I think this like tested her in a way that she maybe wasn't prepared for. And so like I don't want to view her as like villain, even though what she's doing is like truly villainous from her perspective. But like I feel like she's trying her best, but it hurts. It's like when you have a family member that you've grown up with, or maybe a family member you've watched grown up with, and then they go off and they start doing like stupid stuff. And you're like, I know I raised you better than that. Like, I know I was around you to not do that. It's very difficult to watch because I love Vern so much, but I'm like, girl, what are you doing?
I don't know though. I kind of feel like she's the main villain of the season. I'm really convinced by that because
you're not wrong.
Because I think it goes back to like not only the cover up mentality and the keep it under the rug kind of thing, not only the we don't want checks and balances kind of thing, but also the Chimera stuff, the Chimera Stranger stuff, the fact that she tried to kill her former Padawan, tried to then cover it up, and then is now being haunted by it, where he comes back and he kills the Jedi.
He's really afraid of her too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously Soul beat his butt pretty well at that fight, but he's still like an incredibly powerful like fighter. And the fact that he pieced out so quickly, like he was not facing his old master or teacher, you know, that whole I love it so much. And I think it's interesting the way that you're saying that like she's a villain, because technically she is, because this is from the villain's perspective as the heroes. So of course this Jedi would be the villain. I think that again, like the way that this has flipped the script is so cool. I love it.
I'm convinced she's like the main villain of the season again, because she is in a higher position than Soul, and because she should then know better, and yet she does everything worse, and then it doubles down on it like Soul does. But then on top of that, she led to the creation of what is now coming back to haunt her in the form of Chimera or Stranger, where he now has this resentment, this hatred, whatever you want to call it, everything that leads to the dark side and leads to the situation that she's currently in now. And again, I just feel like it's kind of wild that you try to kill a Padawan and then cover it up. I'm like, that makes you a villain, in my opinion. So the fact that the Jedi are painted in this light, end up in this light, and then finish off there, whereas the Stranger, who we've seen him be menacing and cold and a killer and violent in episode 5, and then a lot softer in episode, I believe 7, 8, 6, my bad. And then this episode, I personally really felt like this was him coming full circle, where he showed a lot more humanity than I thought. Like I really was expecting him to kind of triple down on his violent rhetoric, where he would kind of come back to May and be like, all right, you didn't do what I wanted, like I'm gonna kill one of you, or do something again violent, where he didn't choose to do that at the end. Though he chose to not only May go but take on Osha, and it showed a lot of humanity again with him when he saw Venestra, when he felt that fear. Like again, the way they were able to humanize him after we saw him take out so many Jedi was very fascinating. I'm fascinated by this character, and I do feel like he offers something different to Star Wars. Talk to me a little bit about the Stranger.
I love the Stranger so much, not just because we're getting like enemies to lovers vibes, which I'm all about, and not just because I love villains, but basically for everything that you just said. I love that we have a villain who is being presented in this light where we see the duality. I'm all about the duality of characters. It's one of the reasons I don't tend to gravitate towards heroes, because I think they're very linear. There's not a lot of like room for them to have real intrigue as a character, because they're like pure and good and driven, and like that's boring. So I really like the fact that the stranger is this character that we have seen do these horrible things, plow down every Jedi in sight, kill Yord, kill Jackie, but still make such a strong point in doing so. I still constantly go back to the moment with Soul and the stranger when he kills Jackie and he's like, she was a child, and he was like, you brought her here. And then it echoes back to like everything that happens with Brindock and the way that they're treating these children in like a very weird way. Seeing that they pick and choose who is a child in the moment, I think is really interesting. And I think that the way that the stranger has been presented, like you said, like you have all of this violence and then you have all of this tenderness, you have all of the softness, you have the fact that he seems very impressed with what Osha is able to do. He's not intimidated by her power. He's bolstering her. He's the antithesis of everything that Soul has been, where Soul has been trying to be like the arbiter of what Osha's powers are allowed to be. And then you have the stranger essentially unlocking her abilities, giving her the tools to be able to face her past, to face her master, and to make those decisions. Like where we have him telling May, like, oh, this is your chance to like, you know, kill without, you know, to finish your quest or whatever. He doesn't say that to Osha. He lets her make that decision and watches as she makes the decision to kill Soul. And I think that having a villain like that, and then also having this very clear, intentional attempt to show like the equality between him and Osha has meant a lot to me. I think it's something that we often don't see in these dynamics, especially as somebody who loves those dynamics. I've consumed all of the media that has any hints of like the enemies to lovers. I love that we're getting two characters that are very equal and not necessarily their goals, because they do seem to have different goals right now, but the fact that like they're very willing to listen to each other, even though they've been at odds, is really appealing to me. And I like the fact that the stranger seems to really embrace those aspects. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, the layers to him is
there's so many, and it's so cool because like the episodes aren't that long. There's not a really long season, and yet there's so much to talk about with the way these characters have been very carefully crafted and their arcs play out throughout all of these episodes.
I think that's what I was impressed with by the most, where the density of his character is there, and you feel that in the final episode a lot more. Personally, I feel than in previous episodes, even in episode 6, where I was like, I can still see like maybe he's on the manipulation train, but then in this episode, he really kind of doubles down on the fact that he's like, I'm just trying to help right now at this moment. Yeah. We have a common enemy as the Jedi, so I'm literally trying to help you out. So I felt that, and I was like, huh, that's different. I didn't expect that. I still expected him to do some sort of side move and just like stab someone in the back or something. Maybe he stabs May in the back or something. I don't know. I was just expecting the worst out of him because, again, that's what we expect out of dark side users. That's what we've seen in the past. And the fact that he chooses to let both girls have their own lives, obviously Osha with him, but still have this resentment towards the Jedi, and kind of not in a violent way like we saw in episode 5, but more in a realistic way where like this is the way they are. So if we can't change that, then we got to go, we got to run, and we got to do our own thing and form our own thing, which is why the dark side makes more and more sense this episode. And it makes more and more sense throughout the season, right? Where we see a lot more of the justification of it, where it's not the simplicity of the dark side that's so tempting, but the almost like the binding nature of it, where you have to submit to the opposite nature of what you're rejected by. Where if you know the Jedi are the light side, then you're kind of like, I'm kind of forced to take on dark side features in order to combat who I personally feel like is my enemy, which is the Jedi.
It's the whole idea of like, you've made me the villain I've become. Like the rules and structure and this kind of determination that the Jedi have that like the dark side doesn't exist and you can exist. And I think all of that was really interesting themes that were played with here. I also have to say, like, something I really liked about the parallels between Soul and the stranger is the fact that we see Soul not being able to tell Osha and May apart, which I thought was really interesting considering he's so obsessed with Osha, but then he can't really tell them apart. He even as adults, he mistakes the two. It takes a while for him to catch on that that's not OSHA that's on his ship. But then you have, looking back at the first 3 episodes on Alega, as soon as OSHA walks in to the apothecary pretending to be May, Chimera instantly recognizes that that's not May. There's no question that that is May. He's like, that's OSHA. And he makes the whole, you look so much like her, like, which is so great. And then we again see this kind of theme play out in this episode where he asks her to stay and train. She says no. He gives her a second chance. She says no again. And he's like, interesting. May didn't even consider it. She just said yes. And I think it's interesting how the dark side recognizes the differences between the sisters, and the fact that, like, the Jedi, they were interchangeable. And I think that speaks a lot about, like, the individuality of the dark side, and the fact that the Jedi are very much like everybody is a singular unit. And I think that is a really compelling theme. And it's something we've seen not necessarily in Star Wars, but in other stories that play with, like, the villains as being the actual moral good here. So I think it's fascinating. I think it hopefully will make people think differently of some of the different Sith characters and dark side characters. And even looking now at, like, Anakin, his fall to the dark side was because of loss, because of love, because of these emotions that he was being driven to not lean into by the Jedi. And it's like, if the Jedi had just let him have what, like, attachment he clearly needed, because he was a child taken away from his mother, and then he glommed onto Padme, and, like, if that had been embraced rather than treated as, like, this horrible thing he had to, like, hide, would things have been different? Would he have been able to, like, kind of embrace the duality of, like, being a person? And it makes you think very differently. And I love shows that make you think.
Yeah, I really do feel like, to me, he's probably the standout character overall, like, out of all the season, because of his complexity and because of what he brings. And honestly, the last thing I have for Chimera / Stranger is his abilities. I really do feel like that's something that's underrated. And I know this is so simplistic, but it's actually not. Like, if you really, really look, maybe it's just my martial arts love that is coming out right now, but his fighting style, the way he's able to use cortosis, like, everything about him is very different and very out there and strange. Again, living up to his name, The Stranger, where his fighting style is weird. The way he has that little saber in the back, the way he throws it, his ability to lock into the Force and almost use it like echolocation kind of stuff. Like, all that stuff really adds to his dynamic and adds to his character and adds to what he is as a unique character, and not just a dark side Force user who is doing his own thing, but a dark side Force user who is tapping into something we probably haven't seen before. So it's just really high class stuff that I really think we got out of Manny and that we got out of The Stranger. I think it's phenomenal. Let's move on to May and Osha. How'd you feel about their conclusion in this finale?
I was really surprised by the memory loss plotline. That kind of came out of nowhere, and I think I really love it. I think it is something that, should we get a season 2, there's, like, a lot of fun stuff, because it sets her back at, like, square one, and it also, there's a part of it to me that I like the idea of May now being with the Jedi. As a whole, I really love that the sisters switched sides, essentially. You know, where we started, where we ended is complete inverse. I think that's really fascinating. I think it works narratively. But I do ultimately think that I like the memory loss plotline for May, because now we have her essentially being, like, a pseudo apprentice to Vernestra, and, like, the dynamic there, if she's going to help her find the Stranger and Osha, like, it just creates a very different dynamic. And I think it can also show us that Vern is not a good person, because it's like using somebody who has memory loss that very clearly has had their mind wiped to find your former Padawan because you screwed up so badly that now they're a villain is just not good person behavior. So I think there's so much potential storytelling there with that particular plot line. And I know people have kind of seen it as like divisive. There was a tweet that I saw that was hilarious that was like untagged, like referencing fanfic, like untagged memory loss in the final chapter. What is this? And I just think it was so cool. I think it's not expected. That was one of the things that I came into completely blindsided by. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, wait, this is really cool. Like this sets the scene for like a lot of stuff that can be explored, and whether we get a season 2 or like the story continues like in different formats, whatever will be for these characters, that's such great storytelling potential, because the stranger seems to imply that he can try to wipe her memory. It's not clear that he can like fully do it. We don't know what his abilities are at that point, really. It's not something you probably sit around and practice all alone on an island. So I think that it's really interesting that leaves the potential for there to be things that she remembers, maybe flashes. The fact that she and Osha are the same person split into two, like how does that factor in? Is there still a connection between them? You know, is this like the dyad thing that like is being hinted at but not directly like addressed? Like, are they a dyad? And like, just so much good stuff. I love it. I love that we got twins, because that is so Star Wars, but it's not anything like the twins we've seen before. It's completely different. It's not like Luke and Leia. It's not like, you know, Jason and Jaina in the books. It's not like the twins and Visions. Like it's just so interesting. It's such a different dynamic, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on. Yeah, I mean, you're only giving more credit to my theory as far as Vanessa is like the real villain. The way she manipulates May in that moment, I was like, damn, the way she says, like, you poor girl. She almost says it like, you poor girl. I'm about to manipulate you so bad. I'm about to, like, dog walk you and basically make you my servant because I'm taking advantage of someone who literally has a memory wipe. I don't know. I'm just convinced she's like, a borderline dark side user.
It's like they accidentally played directly into Vern's hand, because it ultimately served her purpose with like how she framed Soul, because there's no way for anybody to back up or refute what happened now.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, I don't think it wasn't said. So like, I've been trying to figure out, like, did she claim that Soul wiped this girl's memory? Like, what is that party line that's being sold? It's so interesting, and there's so much angst there. I love a good memory loss plot line. It's not done really anywhere except like soap operas and like telenovelas. So I'm like, this is great. This is the kind of drama that I live for.
Before we move on, the last two things I have is I want to talk about Chimere and Osha and where they could possibly go. And then I want to talk about the two cameos that we got. So really quick, Chimere and Osha, how'd you feel about their conclusion? And specifically more on Osha, because I feel like we talked a lot about Chimere.
I love it. I think it's great. I love that Osha starts out as somebody who's alone on a space station, you know, working as a mech, kind of in a dead end job. And now she's got a hot Sith friend. And they're in a great location, and she's fully realized her abilities and is only kind of going up from here. That is really exciting to me. I am obviously very excited and hopeful that we get to see more romance between them. I think that Star Wars has always been really romantic. Obviously, we have Han and Leia in the original trilogy, and then we have Padme and Anakin, which is a tragic romance, but it's still very romantic. And then Star Wars just kind of forgot that they could do romance. And so I like that we have this little bit of a like, will they, won't they? Is it an enemies to lovers thing? And the fact that it had been confirmed in my interview with Leslie that it is an enemies to lovers style of story. And that we got these like little intimacies between them in this with the hands. I'm all about the hand touching. I also like, obviously I'm a Reylo. Everybody knows I'm a Reylo. I've got Rey and Kylo up here. And I love the fact that there are these really strong parallels between them. The fact that, you know, they're holding the lightsaber together really echoes to like the Last Jedi scene where the lightsabers between the two of them, the power struggle. This is a unified front. The fact that nobody had to die except for all the Jedi. it makes me really happy. And I like that there is this sort of like echo between what we get down the road in the sequel trilogy with Rey and Kylo, and it's echoed here. And the fact that it comes after those in the narrative, like creating Star Wars, but within the actual narrative of the canon is before it, is a really compelling, exciting thing. Like, because they can continue to draw parallels between them, and that's something I love. I love a good parallel. I love a good parallel, especially with enemies to lovers ships like that. So there's a lot there. I hope that they get the opportunity to actually lean into some romance with the Sith. You kind of have this like natural inclination to want to play with like these really strong emotions, like passion and things like that. And so I think it's something Star Wars hasn't done, and I want them to. So badly. Like, give us a season 2 so that we can get more of this dynamic, because again, it's something new, it's something fresh. We haven't seen this before. We haven't seen a Sith power couple. Like, I want that. So I've loved it, and I love so much that Osha has so much agency within it. Like, so much of this is her making the active decision. You know, in episode 6, she was given the opportunity to leave. She stayed. There's just so much there that I just chef's kiss.
I really like that shot. I just tweeted it out like an hour ago. I love it. I love that shot. I think it's really cool. And I think it shows like a different side to Star Wars, like you said, which I really hope we get more of in season 2 if we do get one.
I love that people were instantly paralleling it, that final shot of the two of them, with the scene in The Rise of Skywalker. I've made no secret that I don't like The Rise of Skywalker. I'm a little bit quieter about it these days. But for me, like, as a woman, I really was disappointed with the way that like Rey's character was handled, and where it felt like in order to have power, to have anything, you also had to be alone. And that final shot in The Rise of Skywalker with her and BB-8 standing looking at the suns together, even though, yes, technically she wasn't alone, BB-8 was next to her, but that's not her droid, that's Poe's droid. Like, they have no connection. They are co-workers at best. It left Rey so isolated, and like, to me, so much of that story was like she was a lonely like orphan, and like the fact that there was this connection that was like very clearly set up between her and Ben, and then taken away, like it always sat wrong with me, and years later it still makes my blood boil. And so to have like that scene paralleled between this shot and the fact that like Osha can have it all, she can have power, she can have like this connection that she clearly has with the stranger, like it makes me really excited and hopeful, and it soothes the pain that I've carried for almost 5 years.
Yeah, I totally get that.
You can tell it makes me heat it.
I want to move on really quick to Plagueis and Yoda. We got those two in there. How'd you feel about those two quick cameos that we got?
So good. I love a quick cameo. I don't hate cameos. I just hate cameos that like overwhelm a story. And I think that a true testament to how the Acolyte handled these cameos, they haven't been dominating the discourse today. Like, yes, people are excited. Oh yeah, Plagueis is here. Like, this is really cool. I think all of us collectively freaked out last night about it. But it hasn't been like the main conversation. It hasn't overtaken the story of Osha and May. The same with Yoda. I mean, obviously Yoda makes so much sense. The man has been alive for so long. Of course, he's involved in this era, leading straight into the Phantom Menace, only 100 years away from this. And I do want to know like where that's going, because I want to see Yoda continuing to play the part of like, let's just hide our bad things and move on and pretend they didn't exist with my little backward language. And just, I want to see Vernestra and Yoda just continue to girl boss their way out of every situation.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so fun.
It's insane. The fact that Yoda is gonna be like, yeah, you whooped that kid. He came back. Oh damn, he's back. Like, I don't know. Yoda's like some old gangster. You have to
can
check
we
in with.
just redub Yoda with you saying that?
Yeah, he's like an old Godfather gangster who you have to like check in with every so often to make sure all your crimes are good. Just like, oh, by the way, I covered that up. It might come back to bite me. He's like, I got you. Absolute best Yoda. He's always coming in clutch. Let's move on to full Sabacc before we run out of time.
Full Sabacc.
So our full Sabacc is all about Star Wars TV. Yeah, RB3, go ahead, jump in, man.
I also enjoyed the episode. Thank you.
Yeah, my bad, man. I was gonna check in with you.
Oh yeah, and I've been up and down on the season for sure. I thought some of the decisions were questionable for sure, but I definitely the ending was great. I mean, just the lightsaber fight was just phenomenal between Soul and Quaimere, and that was some amazing stuff. And then I saw people online, saying the show looked cheap or whatever. I just don't understand that criticism at all. I don't think this show looked cheap whatsoever. I thought everything from the production design to the fight choreography, all of that was just like top tier. If there are like legitimate issues, I probably would say is some of the character motivation, for me. But I'll see where we go in season 2 with it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on all that, especially for this episode. That's something I didn't say up top, but I really did feel like this episode was really, really good quality wise. And I felt like maybe some other episodes weren't, if I'm being honest. I felt like a few of them were like, I was like, oh, I felt a little rushed. And this one felt so much more deliberate and calm. And like, let's focus on the characters. Let's let them have an emotional moment. Like the fact that May and Osha got to cry together was very impactful for me personally. Those little things like that really make the episode really, really work. So I think that worked out.
Also, shout out Mike K in the chat, and shout out Fabrico and Mike K in the chat. Thank y'all for chatting with us.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in, guys. I appreciate you guys. I swear I'm gonna get to some of your questions before we finish up. We're gonna make Full Sabacc a little bit shorter, but I want to ask Maggie how you feel about just where we are with Star Wars right now.
I feel really hopeful with where Star Wars is. I think I was very hard on Ahsoka, and I think that was probably in part because we were coming straight off of Andor. But now that I've also had the Acolyte, I'm like, I think Andor and Acolyte are my favorites. They're just the quality, the storytelling, the daring, kind of bold decisions that they have made have been really appealing to me. I think that we need more stories like that kind of take what we know about Star Wars and flip it on the head. I think that's really exciting. I'm still really hopeful for Skeleton Crew. I have wanted Jude Law in Star Wars for almost 20 years. So that's like a really random wish fulfillment for me to have him in Star Wars. So I feel really good about it. I think that Disney needs to like not listen to review bombers or loudmouths on YouTube and listen to the fact that like this show is doing really well. Like it has better numbers than Andor, which like immediately got a season 2 renewal. It has numbers that are like right up there with Ahsoka, which obviously everybody loved there. I'm a naysayer, but I hope that they don't listen to those naysayers because it's The Last Jedi all over again. It's anything that goes to like question the Jedi as like the ultimate good is like, ooh, scary. No, it's good storytelling. It's like challenging things. We should always be challenging the things that we love. And yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm positive. I'm in a good place. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it did. I'm curious how you feel about Star Wars TV specifically and the kind of like, I don't want to say sporadic, but like very like we're over here, we're over there. How do you feel about just Star Wars TV kind of being the go-to Star Wars thing now? Because we haven't had a movie in such a long time.
I think that it is really smart. I think that it kind of goes against what was going on with Marvel. I think Marvel really quickly hit fatigue because everything was connected. Everything was really inherently tied to every other story that was playing. You had to watch 2 seasons of a TV show to really understand what was happening here. But hey, actually, it doesn't really matter if you watch WandaVision because we didn't actually know how that show ended. So we're going to do Multiverse of Madness completely different. And I think that Star Wars is hopefully seeing where things went wrong there and is leaning into this idea that you can play with this very large galaxy and things don't like ultimately, yes, everything is connected, everything leads to it, but you can still enjoy this and not necessarily need every single movie, every single TV show. And I think that's really important. I think it's really vital if you want to have a really successful like tentpole franchise that you can have things that people can check in and out of and not necessarily have to commit your entire life to watching every single show as soon as it's airing. But I do think that Star Wars television is hindering itself by making the shows very short seasons, and their runtime is very short. I think Andor was a really good example of like letting a show breathe. I'm very afraid of Andor season 2 because it is kind of pushing like 10 years into so few episodes. And I think that's really scary. I'm really, really worried about that because Andor is like God tier television for me. So I think that we're still seeing like a really weird, like growing phase for everything on streaming. I think that is kind of ultimately my thoughts on it. It's a weird thing because I have a lot of issues with streaming. I have a lot of issues with like the model, both like for creatives and for actors and for like everyone involved. And I think Disney Plus is one of the ones that have kind of not necessarily found their niche yet. I think Netflix very early on recognized that people still want fairly long seasons. So hopefully they learn from that. Hopefully they start to do longer things. We shall see.
Yeah, it's almost interesting to think about. I don't want to get sidetracked because that's
I'm so
usually
sorry.
what I do. No, I'm not thinking about streaming, which I've done like 10 episodes on streaming, if not more. Because I'm really fascinated by it because again, we saw the rise of it, right? We were like in the media, in the industry, 2014, 2015,
Yep.
all the way up
Watching
here.
it happen.
And it's interesting because that kind of came with, I personally feel like Stranger Things was the biggest like 8 episodes and it's really good and check it out. And I was like, oh, cool. That's a cool concept. But even that is like much, much longer than what we got with the Acolyte.
Yeah.
I think the run times are really the key where you do feel the episode lengths almost hit like 20 minutes and you're just like, really 20 minutes? Like, can we get a little bit more? I feel like that's Disney being very reactionary to attention spans and to like TikTok minds. And I think you just have to trust your audience a little bit more and not just assume that they're going to get bored after 20 minutes and tune out.
And I keep hoping that they'll learn from the fact that shows like Suits or Grey's Anatomy or any of the network shows that go from being like, we don't syndicate anymore. So it goes to Netflix, which is like the new form of syndication. And then it's like #1 for weeks. And people are watching 7 seasons of 28 episodes that are like 45 minutes long and they're binging the entire thing. And I'm like, do you guys see this? The reason why those shows live on forever is because everybody was given the time to like grow attached to the characters. And we were allowed to have filler episodes. And we're like, we fundamentally lost why television worked. And now we just have, I hate the phrase so much, but we do have like 8-episode movies.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I loved about Andor was the fact that it was, what was it, 12 episodes or something like that?
Yeah.
And they were like full hours, it felt like, you know, they didn't cheap out on that. So,
and it was like 3-episode arcs and like everything was like very structured. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely think more of that, even though I thought with Acolyte, you know, I think they could have given more runtime. I also think even if they wanted to, it could have even been, this kind of also contradictory, but it also could have been like 6 episodes, even if they were all like, you know, maybe edited a little different to like, or structured a little different, you know, to the full, to, you know, fit the full hour. Cause I feel like it was probably like 6 full hours in total, but it was split across 8 episodes. I don't know. But anyway, I still really,
I agree.
Yeah, and I still really loved. I mean, I still loved the choices that they made, and I loved how they got to those choices. I do think more time in between that and more character moments would have helped flesh out those decision making for some people a little bit more.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if people go back and binge it in one sitting or in like however you binge things these days, and if that changes some of those things. Because I've rewatched a couple of the episodes just to like refresh on things, and it feels like it flows better when you watch it kind of all in one sitting and not have like a week in between them, which, you know, streaming.
Yeah. Again, yeah, it works sometimes. It doesn't work other times. I feel like that's definitely there. I also feel like the editing is there as well, where I'm a big proponent of letting scenes breathe, not just episodes breathe, but scenes. And I just felt like a lot of scenes were just like, done, moving on, done, moving on. And I was like, slow down, please, and let moments breathe. I really do feel like that's part of it. Moving on to another question I had for you, Maggie, is where we're going from here. How do you feel about the future of Star Wars with the upcoming films and obviously the show renewals that we already have?
I I have a lot of feelings about the Rey movie in particular. Like I'm very afraid because I
Really?
think it goes back to like I had such a visceral reaction to the Rise of Skywalker. I love the character of Rey. We talked about it on the panel at Star Wars Celebration. Like there's so much about who Rey is as a character that means so much to me. And I've had these like 5 years to like kind of parse through the feelings that I had after the Rise of Skywalker. And every time we get news about the Rey movie, I kind of feel like I'm going to have a panic attack because it is going to reopen not only the wounds of the Rise of Skywalker, but the wounds of the way people reacted to Rey and the visceral like hate brigade around her character and around the sequels. And it strikes fear in my heart every time it comes up. And I like that it's still far off, so I can still kind of like get ready for it. But it makes me afraid. And like I don't know. I also have this thought in my head that like Star Wars movies are never happening again because we keep having these movies that get announced and then nothing ever happens. So then at the same time, there's like the James Mangold movies, which I'm really excited about, like the prospect of like what I've heard about that. It sounds really cool, but at the same time, I'm like, will it even happen? Like, I love the fact that like the Bo Williamson from Andor is involved in writing it. Like, I'm very excited about it. I love his work on Andor, but at the same time, will it happen? Like the Star Wars movies have been such a weird kind of like far off thing that doesn't feel real. So I don't know if I'll fully reckon with the fact that any of those movies seem like they're happening until like we have a picture of like the clapboard on the first day of filming or something like that. Just none of those feel real. Whereas the Star Wars television feels very tangible. It feels very real. We know these things are happening. I know like the Mando movie is technically a movie, but that feels like television to me. I just feel like the continuation of that story. I almost called it like a decom movie. It feels like a decom movie. It feels like the Lizzie McGuire movie after the show ended. You can tell I'm tired. But yeah, I don't know. I have a really weird like love-hate relationship post-Tross with the idea of Star Wars movies, whereas the television feels very comfortable and I'm not afraid of television.
Yeah, it feels like you can take more risks, right?
Yeah.
You're not as fearful of what's to come with movies because movies have so much stakes nowadays. With people taking movies out of theaters after a week, with movies bombing right away, with a fear of losing money now. Like, never mind. There's so many rants I can go on. It's not even funny. I have a lot of thoughts, like a lot on like the TV, Star Wars thing, movies thing, because I personally feel like there's nothing greater than Star Wars movies. And I like maybe Andor was like the closest I felt to feeling after seeing Rise of Skywalker. Like just that's how like much love I get out of Star Wars movies. And I just don't have that same feeling when I watch The Mandalorian, for example, or other Star Wars shows. And I just feel like focusing on the films is actually a good thing and people should be inspired by that. And I think Rey is the perfect way to do it because it is such a good character, in my opinion. And I feel like I know it's just hard, right? Because there's so much controversy within even the community that's not psychotic with The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker and this infighting. And I'm just like... I just love Rey. I just want to see a good Rey movie.
If you presented it as like a Rey television show, I don't think I would have the same like terror in my heart. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm a television person. Like I love television in and out. Like that is my medium of choice. But something about movies feels so much more like this is the end. Like this is it's a very different feeling. Like television feels like the kind of thing where if there's something that happens, if there's like a strong reaction, they can like shift things around. Television's much more malleable than movies. And I think that's where a lot of my like fear is. And then like the fallout of like the Rise of Skywalker was such a like divisive thing. Like you said, like whether you loved it or hated it, like there's a lot of really strong emotions. And I think for me, I'm very afraid to like re-enter that discourse because it'll be inescapable. None of us can be like, that is a fray that will touch all of us.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunately true, and I'm just kind of bummed by it, if I'm being
I
honest,
know.
because I
It's
do feel
good.
like because it's embodied by so much negativity,
Hmm.
whether it's on one side or another side, I just feel like if we could focus on just the character and who she is, it'd just be really cool to have this other opportunity in this next generation, and I think that'd be awesome. Before we move on to Squad Up, the last thing I have, which I actually feel like is kind of important to touch on specifically about this show, Maggie, is what Lucasfilm can learn about the toxic backlash, the actors getting hate, the Instagram filled comments that have personally seen firsthand. Like I've seen a
Hmm.
lot of comments, and even I got firsthand. I was like, I got one tweet that got like almost 2,000 responses.
Oh my
Just
God.
like the
Hmm.
worst things you can ever call a human being. And it's just like that's like tiny, and I just got a tiny bit of it because I know so much people got so much worse. So many more women got way more attacked than I did. Black women, just other people really got worse experiences than I did, and I just got a taste of it, and I was like, "Yo,
Wow.
this is crazy."
I think I have
What
blocked
can they
like
learn from it?
I think I've blocked like maybe 5,000 people since the
Yeah,
app started. Like I was one of the people that got like the death threats and rape threats for it was the episode after like a random like pronoun thing because you know that triggers everybody, the idea that any of us have pronouns. And it was just like such an eye roll situation to be that much hate that I woke up to. I I don't know how I feel right now about how Lucasfilm has handled the show. I think that I thought that they had learned from Obi-Wan when they came out in full force to support Moses. And I don't necessarily feel like that same sort of energy was brought here to a show that arguably has a much more diverse cast across the board. And I don't know if it's like the Streisand effect where they decided this time they wouldn't address it in a big way because then that draws more focus to it. So like I understand like from a marketing standpoint that you have to look at it from all directions, but it did feel like, and this is going to sound terrible, I really love the community engagement that has been around the show. I love how they were like sending out all of these like care packages and like really getting the fans involved, like when they brought Charlie in to do like the whole Yord Horde thing. Like I really love all of that, but it also felt like that was a bandage to hide what was going on behind the scenes. I understand that from a marketing standpoint. Like I don't fault anybody for doing that. That's just my perspective of it because I have seen like the violent visceral hate from like my side of things and like hearing from other people who have experienced this, seeing what's happening to like the cast on their comments. The fact that it felt like the cast was kind of being left to make jokes about the situation, I don't know. It just felt very odd to me. It didn't feel like there was a real like plan in place. Like once again, it felt like they had to come up with the answer, even though they know they should expect it. And that might not even be the case. They might be handling it so well that we don't see what they're doing, which is like fine. That's great. But it just felt like they weren't as prepared as they should have been. And it felt like they were just doing a lot of like the fun fan stuff to hide that. And that's just my perspective. It could totally not be the case, but I hope that they learn from this in a positive way. I want to believe that they all understand that, you know, review bombing is a thing. There's people reviewing episodes before the episodes even drop. Overall, critics seem to like it. I think it's like 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is like pretty good for a Star Wars thing because people either love it or hate it. And the fact that it has such a negative audience score has nothing to do with people watching it. People are creating accounts simply to do this. And I hope that they have learned from The Last Jedi, which is still looked back on as one of the best from the sequel trilogy, despite the wild reaction to it. But I've yet to see that it feels that they actually have learned anything from that. I feel like they still have this weird idea of like, if these three really annoying, horrible guys on YouTube don't like our show, we must be doing something wrong. Like, why are these men's like opinions so much like more valuable to you than like the people who are actually watching your show, who are actually covering your show, who are actually talking about it day in and day out in like a positive like matter? I don't understand like that whole concept.
I mean,
Very frustrating.
there's so many layers to it, right? I mean, it goes back to the YouTube algorithm, which promotes hate clicks, hate rage, rage bait, whatever you want to call it. Like this has been going on since like 2014, 2015,
Mhm.
since the sequels came out. I mean, since the trailer for The Force Awakens. And the evolution of it where hatred drives engagement, engagement drives clicks, clicks drives money, you get more money if you make hate
And it's an
videos.
election year again.
Yeah,
It's Jedi all over again.
yeah, it feels very much like reacting to that, at least as a fan or even as a company, feels very much like you're dumb. Like, why would you engage with that or just be? I don't. I saw a lot of people, and I've said this like 20 times already, but I saw a lot of people like engaging with like rage bait hatred channels who have literally been proven to be white supremacists, and engaging with them in a very like endearing, like, let me explain it to you, bro. And I'm just like, no, don't explain it to them.
Like, don't
Like
feed
they're
the
really
algorithm.
not,
Did we
they don't
not
care.
learn anything? Like, they don't care. And the thing that is the most bewildering to me, like, even when they're sitting there doing like these reaction videos, the people in their comments are not watching the show. Then those people then take it back to social media and just parrot whatever insane opinions these people have, and they're not even watching the show. The number of people that I had engaged with over like the cortosis thing, that I was like, but that's not how you tell a story. Like, you're not just going to be like, hey guys, this is cortosis in case you didn't read any of the legends. But that's not how you tell a story. You have to wait for the next episode. And then it was explained. Oh, I didn't watch the episode. Then why are you talking to me about it? Why are you in my comments on every single post that I make complaining about something you don't even watch?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I personally feel, as a community, as a Star Wars community, we should not engage with it in any way, and we should try to avoid it in every way. However, as a company and as a corporation, as a studio, it's different, and I do feel like there needs to be a slightly more aggressive stance. Because I personally, if I'm being super duper honest, I have felt that Lucasfilm has not only dropped the ball with this one, but in the past as well. I even felt, and I tweeted this out a while back too, I even felt like the Moses Ingram one was like too little too late and almost kind of like a band-aid.
It was
Very
reactionary.
small. Yeah, and it was
They should have known
very,
it was coming.
and the statement, to be honest, for me personally, was very just like down the line, down the middle. Don't say hate messages to Moses Ingram. That's mean. And I'm just like, anyone can say that. Like, don't say hate messages to Moses. Like, that's such a basic down the line thing. You can make a much more thought out statement than that. And I knew Ewan did his best, but I just feel like there should have been a bigger, more formidable stance saying we condemn this specific racist action, these thoughts, these beliefs, these ideas, and there's a way to do it. And I do feel like there needs to be a little bit more of responsibility, especially with this cast. I mean, a black female lead, Soul, Lee Jung Jae, Manny, all these incredible actors having to put up with this is just, to me, just unacceptable. Yeah.
No, because Star Wars Galaxy should be for everybody. I know that's like, everybody hates that phrase because it's like so overused, but these are people that we want to continue being in our shows, that we want to continue to like diversify this galaxy that is so full of life. But you can't have those people in front of the camera if you're not going to support them as soon as you wrap for the day. It's just not fair. I mean, I think, and this is a tangent, but I was very disheartened by like the fandom reaction to like Ahmed Best getting to come back to do his kids show, to getting to have like his like cameo, because they kept framing it like, oh, he's finally been redeemed. What did he have to be redeemed for? He didn't do anything wrong. Like, there's no redemption for him. It's y'all. Like, the fans are the ones that made his life a living hell. And now he's getting a second chance at experiencing a galaxy that he loves, that he wants to be part of in a positive way. So, like, why are we framing this like he needed redemption? He didn't do anything. He just showed up and did his job, and y'all were horrible, racist bigots. Like, I don't know. It was just very weird framing, in my opinion.
Yeah, but that whole thing is ridiculous. The idea of attacking an actor because his character is bad, so they have to be redeemed.
And I love Jar Jar Binks. I have so much Jar Jar Binks merchandise.
Yeah.
I loved him as a kid because it was a kid's movie, and that's like a kid character.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last episode, literally last night. Last thing I'll say, we'll move on to Squad Up. and I think RB3 mentioned it in the chat, or someone mentioned it in the chat. This gave me like I got flashbacks to like, all right, I understood why people hated Jar Jar now. And this season gave me my most hated character.
Is it Basil?
I hate Basil. And everyone loves him. And I'm just like, I want to like punt this little beaver so bad. He's so annoying. He's so inconsistent. His character, like he's sabotaging ships. He's like trying to fight May. He's trying to be funny. I'm just like, bro, shut up and sit down, bro. Like you're ruining the show. Get out of my screen.
And then isn't he supposed like that species is supposed to be like a super smart like species of beavers or something like that or something?
I mean, they can communicate pretty well with other Jedi, so I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I just didn't like that guy. I just hated that little homie. I'm so glad he's going to be gone for, I mean, hopefully he's gone for season 2. That's the last thing I'll say about the Acolyte. Let's move on to Squad Up with Squad Leader Ace for this week. And this week for Squad Up with Squad Leader Ace, I have a scenario for you, putting you inside a Star Wars universe scenario, and you have to pick your team. For this one, you are a rebel commander planning to steal the location of an Imperial facility creating dangerous weapons. You have discovered that the location of the facility is on the personal data pad of a wealthy supporter of the Empire who just so happens to be throwing a fancy birthday party. Your plan is to infiltrate the party, steal his data pad, and take him to a secret base to interrogate the passcode out of him. You need a small elite team to complete your mission. You need, number 1, a reliable +1. Your cover is that of a wealthy couple who are madly in love. This will make it easier for you to go unnoticed by security and other guests. You need a trustworthy companion who can think on their feet and assist you in taking down the financier. You want to be convincing, so choose a +1 that you may or may not have an interest in. Who knows what can brew during this mission. Number 2, a performing act. Part of your plan is to distract from any suspicion with a performer that is keeping all guests and security forces occupied. You need someone that will not only stall for time, but mesmerize the audience. Number 3, you need a speeder. Once you have the rich guy, you need to book it to the secret location where the rest of the team is waiting. Choose a speeder that will get you there the fastest. Number 4, a hacker. Part of your mission was securing the donor's data pad, so you need someone who can hack into it. After you interrogate the passcode out of him, someone needs to get past the additional securities. This is a systems hacker that you can rely on. Number 5, you need muscle. Just in case anything goes down, you need one strong soldier who can take on a large Imperial presence by themselves, and they might just be handy in interrogation. And finally, number 6, you get a fast creature. Your plan is to quickly leave to a secret location to the far corners of the galaxy for a team pickup. You don't want to be scanned by speeders for speeders, so you need a speedy creature to get you there quickly. Maggie,
yes,
I made this one especially for you because I know you're a big fan of shipping, and who hasn't shipped ourselves in the Star Wars universe? Why not make a scenario where you need a reliable +1 to sneak into this party? Who is your +1 that, hey, if something happens, right?
Cassian Andor. As soon as I read this prompt, I was like, we would make a beautiful couple sneaking in here. And also, who is like more reliable than Cassian Andor? I think he would be the perfect partner in this kind of scenario, especially since it's like spy stuff and he loves spy stuff. So I think this is like a perfect first date.
I mean, you never know, right? I mean, Cassian he's a flirty dude.
Yes.
He's definitely out there for sure. Yeah, I think that's a great one. I think Cassian's great. Obviously, like you said, he's a pro. This is what he does. Yeah. But at the same time, you never know. First date. I'm picking someone who I shouldn't pick, but I'm gonna pick her anyways. I mean, I have to pick her, right? She's like right behind me. Hera Syndulla. I'm picking Hera. I mean, hey, Hera, she's reliable, she's smart, she's well thought out, she's one of the best generals in Star Wars, one of the best pilots ever. And, you know, she's a dime, bro. She's a dime. I have to pick Hera.
Are you ready to be a stepfather?
I was gonna say, me stepping in for newly single Hera Syndulla. Stepped up. Yeah. Jason, what's up? What's up? I'm your puppy, like Eddie Guerrero would say. So I'm picking Hera. That's like an old wrestling reference, by the way. Number two, who are you picking as your performing act that will distract the party?
I have gotten Max Rebo out of retirement. I think everyone would be so excited to have their favorite Jizz player back on the stage, and everyone will be just so engrossed in what he's up to that they won't know what I'm up to.
That's a good one. Yeah, I feel like Max Rebo this is what he does. He needs a crowd and he can distract the crowd really well. Yeah, Max Rebo's a legend, man. You just need to bring him to more events and make sure
Yeah,
he's
I'm
the
just gonna get
performing
him
act.
both places. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm picking someone who I, I think I saw him in the Star Wars Outlaws trailer, and I was like, what did you do? I don't know what he did, but it seems like, he's got some abilities to get on the Empire's wrong side, and he's also a cool jazzy singer who can really put on a performance. I'm picking Lulio Primic as my
Oh,
performing act. He's in a jar, but that's okay. I feel like he can sing his way out of most situations, and I'm sure he's a great speaker too. So if he has to make a long-winded speech about why he wrote the song, I feel like he can nail that. So,
yeah.
who are you picking? Oh, what are you picking for your speeder?
Okay, so gosh, I'm really bad remembering speeder types, but I think I'm going to go easy and I'm going to use the speeder that the Jedi were using on Brindok in the Acolyte because that just looked really fun, and I want to ride that. Speeders are one of the styles of transportation and the universe that I am not on the up and up with. I'm just like, oh, that's cool. I like that speeder. I also love the speeder that Mando used in one of the episodes on Tatooine, but I think I'll go with the one from Brindok.
That's a great one. I like that one. It's very Return of the Jedi. Is it 74Z speeder? I think it's what it's called. I used to know. I used to know
I
all
know.
these, and now I don't know any of them.
And I'm just like, that's cool.
I used to know the name of the speeder. I don't know if it's like the 410 or the 104, but I'm picking the one from Solo, A Star Wars Story, the one that Han steals, the convertible speeder that he takes Kira on. That's the speeder I'm picking. I feel like that's a good one
You're trying
take on
to
this.
impress Hera.
Oh yeah. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
I
I'm
speak
like,
for you.
I've got a car. I'm pulling a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man one. That's all. That's all you need, a car.
Yeah.
Who are you? Who is your systems hacker?
So I'm picking Rose Tico. She's not necessarily a hacker, but I think that in The Last Jedi, she proved how like good she is working on her feet, which I think a hacker should also be like really smart and savvy in what's going on the ground. And I also feel like in The Rise of Skywalker, she showed herself to be really good with like tactical stuff and like working at the computers. And so I think she'd be a really good hacker. And I think I would trust her to be the woman in the chair for me.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you want Rose is a great choice because you trust her and because you know she can do a good job. I might be risking it with my choice. I think I'm picking someone that the trust is like not really there, but I got my muscle just in case anything goes down anyways. I'm picking DJ. I think DJ is one of the best hackers in Star Wars. He's super smart.
I almost picked DJ, and then I was like, he'll betray me though.
Yeah, I was gonna say we can burn him. We can just leave him with the rich guy.
Yeah.
But just in case I just really need to get quickly inside a system, I feel like he's the guy to do it. So DJ is my choice for my hacker. Who is your muscle, Maggie?
Fennec Shand.
Nice.
Again, somebody I implicitly trust. Yes, she is a gun for hire, but she will follow through.
That's a great choice. Yeah. I mean, I feel like she brings so much to the team already, right? Because she's a sniper. So she could be on the lookout as well. She could be taking out stormtroopers from a distance. Yeah, there's just a lot of power there from Fennec. That's a great one. I was thinking more like, just head down.
Like physical muscle.
Yeah, just like running through stormtroopers like it's, nothing to him, which is why I picked my boy Zeb. Zeb is going to be side-eyeing me the whole time when I'm with Hera. He's going to be like, I know what you're doing and I'm not about it. Spitting on the memory of Kanan. And I'm going to be like, yo, it's whatever, man. But at the same time, in case anything goes down, I feel like he can just, again, put his head down and mow down like dozens of stormtroopers at a time. So that's why I'm picking Zeb, and I'm risking it for anything that might go down as far as like, I don't know. He just might be mad at me for some reason. I don't know why. Who are you picking as your fast creature to escape?
I am going to pick a Fathier, I think is how you say it. It's one of those words I see a lot, but I don't have to say out loud. Because I love The Last Jedi. I love their introduction. I love like the release of them. I love how fast they are. I like that the horses, basically, that's what I love. I want to leap onto a horse and ride away into the night with Cassian Andor.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great choice, especially speed. I feel like they might just
They're
literally
really
be
fast.
the fastest. Yeah, I don't know if I can keep up with that. I always pick Baractals because I think they're the coolest creatures in Star Wars. They're
They
my
are.
favorite. But I kind of feel like I need to pick something else. You know what? I'm picking a Blurg. I feel like, again, Ryloth trying to impress Hera. I'm like, yo, I got that speeder and I'm an expert on the Blurg. So you can just hop on and we can, ride off into the sunset together. I keep going back to Hera throughout my entire mission. This mission is not about an Imperial location or taking down this rich donor. It's about me and Hera trying to spark something up in case anything goes down.
So is Zeb actually your wingman then? He's here to pretend to be the hired gun to help with, any combat, and technically.
That's right. Yeah, he's here to just have my back and just hype me up the whole time and be like, he kind of looks like Kaden in a way, in a weird way. And that's like the whole vibe I'm going with throughout my entire mission.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this mission is not about no Empire, man. It's about my future. It's about my life.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't blow up at the end.
Yeah.
You're not following the canon path.
Yeah, you just never know. Maggie, let's run back your picks, starting with your +1.
Cassian Andor.
Your performing act.
Max Rebo.
Your speeder.
The cool one from Rendok.
Your hacker.
Rose Tico.
Your muscle.
Fennec Shand.
And finally, your creature.
Fathiers.
And for my +1, I'm picking Harrison Dula. My performing act is Lulio Primic. My speeder is Han Solo speeder in Solo Star Wars Story. My hacker is DJ. My muscle is Zeb. And my creature is a Blurg. Maggie, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate your time. I know this ran a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I feel like that's what the Acolyte brings. Yeah. Where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Maggie of the Town. I'm over on Instagram at the Maggie Lovitt, and you can always find me over on Collider, where my interview with Leslie will be dropping tomorrow.
And you can find me on Twitter at Squad Leader Ace. You can follow us at First Cut and at First Cut TMO. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. RB3, where can everyone find you?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
Either way, guys, for Sabacc the Block, we're going to be peacing out. So peace out. Deuces.